Hello, everyone. Well, it's been a sad, sad week with the recent passing of General Colin Powell, and I just wanted to do a tribute to him. I wanted to do a video about him and about his life. And General Colin Powell was Secretary of State under George H.W. Bush and George W. Bush, and he had one blunder, one error that he made was to recommend war in Iraq when there were no weapons of mass destruction in Iraq. So it was somewhat of an unnecessary war, but they overthrew the dictator Saddam Hussein. So that was a good thing, but the bad thing was that there were no weapons of mass destruction. We got into an unnecessary war. But Colin Powell, he sincerely and fervently believed that there were weapons of mass destruction. He was convinced by George W. Bush that there were weapons of mass destruction, and later he became critical of George W. Bush for entering the Iraq War, even though he had given a 57-minute or 75-minute speech to the UN recommending that they go to war and asking for allies to join him in the war against Iraq. Now, he was born on April 5th, 1937, to Jamaican parents, and he did 2 tours of duty in Vietnam. He had a lot of military experience right out there in the fields, but he had been asked to investigate the My Lai massacre. Yeah, he was involved with the My Lai massacre, and he found no wrongdoing in the My Lai massacre, and said that the relations between the Vietnamese people and the U.S. troops was just great. That they just loved each other, they got along great, and that there was no wrongdoing. So, he's kind of a yes man to begin with. Served under Reagan too. He served under three Republican presidents, and he considered himself a conservative. And it was when Obama came into Oval Office, he supported Obama. He switched over and became a Democrat. He switched sides. He switched sides and became a Democrat, and supported Obama. Supported Obama's objectives, and later on he strongly opposed President Trump. He had no good things to say about President Trump, and he said that of Biden that he had served with Biden for 30 to 40 years, that he had worked with Biden, and that he was going to support Biden. Thing is, nobody knew what was going to happen when Trump was being forced out of office. Nobody knew what was going to happen. Nobody knew what Trump would do. They didn't know that he would lead an insurrection against the U.S. Congress, and that he would totally get away with it, because the Congress is half Republican and they're just yes men themselves. And after January 6th of 2021, Colin Powell said, "I don't consider myself a Republican anymore." He was done with the Republican Party, but he was a he was a moderate. Colin Powell was a moderate. Yes, he was one of us. He was one of us. He was a moderate. He was a moderate, originally a moderate conservative, but later on he just became a moderate. He was one of us. He was a moderate. He didn't go to either extreme. He didn't go all the way to the right or all the way to the left. He knew that there was racism in the Republican Party. Yes, he knew that that the Republican Party had been infiltrated by racists, and that racists were supporting the Republican Party, and he didn't like it. He didn't like what he saw. He wrote two autobiographies, two memoirs, and talked about his life and the things that he had learned. He had a lot to say. He had a lot to say. Colin Powell was an incredibly intelligent man, and probably more intelligent than I am. He got farther than I did in life, that's for sure. But yeah, Colin Powell was a very, very bright man, smart as a whip. Died of a combination of COVID and blood cancer. He did get vaccinated, and the vaccine didn't do much of anything for him. He died of the COVID complications anyway. He was 84 years old. And they just had his funeral, and I just wanted to shout out to Colin Powell and say how sorry I am that he lost his life. And even though he supported Don't Ask, Don't Tell in the military, you know, that's how he had been raised and how he had been taught, you know. But he was a terrific person, a great judge of character. He knew even before I did that Trump would do something that is stupid, like invade Congress with his minions. He knew he had Trump's number from the beginning. He dialed in and had Trump's number from the beginning. He was a great judge of character, Colin Powell was. He knew when someone was not all there or was something wrong with them. He could judge character magnificently. So he knew that he did not want to support Trump even once. He didn't want to support Trump even once, and he found out that indeed Trump had low character, because the thing he primarily objected to was probably Trump's comments about Mexicans. You know, how Trump said bad things about Mexicans and said that the people trying to come into this country were all criminals. All of them. All of them are criminals. He just branded them criminals and said, our country will never be the same. That he said that recently. Yeah, Trump said that recently, that our country will never be the same because over 1 million people have poured across the border, and he thinks every single last one of them is a criminal. Really, honestly, he does. He believes they're criminals. So, Colin Powell had Trump's number from the beginning and refused to support Trump or become a Trumpite or even vote for Trump. He wouldn't even vote for Trump. He voted for Hillary Clinton and then Obama. Obama, then Hillary Clinton. Then he voted for Biden later. And I can't totally agree with him, but I do agree that what Trump did on January 6th was uncalled for. It was a betrayal of our country. He lied about the election being rigged, and people believed him, even though it was a very elaborate lie, and became unraveled by the Justice Department. And even the Supreme Court weighed in and said that there was no no election fraud. That it was a genuine win by Biden. And the thing that clues you in that it was a lie was that he said that he thought the election was rigged way before the election even took place. So how can you know that there's going to be election fraud way in advance before the election takes place? How do you know? How do you know that there's going to be election fraud? Because it was a story that he made up. It's a story he made up, and he had every intent in following through with this story. And he did. And then he sent his minions to invade the Congress building. And Colin Powell knew not to trust Trump from the very beginning. He had Trump's number, knew that Trump was crackerjack. It was cuckoo. Cuckoo. Yeah. He was pretty cuckoo what Trump did. I could see it coming. I knew what he was planning, and I did not like it. I didn't like it, and but I knew only a few weeks in advance. Colin Powell knew 4 years in advance that he didn't approve of Trump and that he wasn't going to support Trump. And he also supported Obama. So Colin Powell was a moderate like us. He did his best to pick out of the many choices he had, to pick the best person of all the choices, to pick the best person to lead, to pick the best person to guide this country. And while I do admit that Trump accomplished a lot during his administration, including bringing back the economy practically from the dead after the COVID-19 crisis caused a market-wide crash, and even the whole globe, a global depression. It was a global-wide depression, and Trump guided us out of that. But it's basically, why do we not vote for Trump? Why are we not Trump supporters? Because he's got a big mouth on him. If he kept his mouth shut, his supporters wouldn't love him as much if he kept his mouth shut. But if he kept his big mouth shut, he'd have a lot more supporters from the other side. He thinks that his supporters are all he needs. All he needs are his supporters. And it's not true. He needs more. He needs more than just his supporters to stay in power and to maintain power if he wants power. And power's been taken away from him. They didn't give him a second term. They gave the election away to Joe Biden, because every single liberal in the entire nation voted all at once because they wanted to see Trump out of office so badly. They had to be convinced. Usually these liberals are slackers and they don't vote. But this time they did vote. And there was a terrible consequence of taking Trump out of office. He showed his power to influence the mad, the insane, and the outcast, social pariahs. He was able to influence them to invade the Capitol. And they did. They stormed the Capitol, and they might not consider themselves social pariahs. They may have tons and tons and tons of bragging rights, right? But even somebody who's got an established business like Dave Lindahl with his My Pillow, even he, the things that he says make him an outcast. Even though he's in the mainstream and owns a business, he makes himself an outcast with his words. And that's why I call them outcasts, because they're outcasts from society with the words that they speak. Make them beyond the pale of being outcasts. Why have I chose to be a moderate? Why have I chosen moderation? Why have I chosen to be in the middle and to be an independent? Well, for the very exact same reasons that Colin Powell chose to be a moderate and independent. Not totally exact, not totally exactly the same, but very close to it. To take a measured, reasoned approach. A measured, reasoned approach to the political arena and also the social arena and life in this country. To take a very careful, very measured, very reasoned approach. To not go to extremes. To not go off the deep end. Some ways I'm more conservative, in other ways I'm more liberal. And while Colin Powell was never ever a gay-friendly man, wasn't gay-friendly at all, but there are certain things I can agree with him on. And so, Colin Powell, life lost too soon to COVID. Who knows, he might have reached his 100th birthday if although he had blood cancer, that's right. But if it hadn't been for COVID, he would have at least lived another year, maybe. Another couple years of good life ahead of him, taken away by COVID. So, whoever is responsible for COVID is responsible for us losing Colin Powell, a great man and a great statesman and a asset to our country. Whoever invented COVID is responsible for his loss, for Colin Powell's loss. So many others, so many great people died this year, and it's interesting. So many people died this year and last year, and yet they don't tell us what they died of. They just, boom, like that, just sort of up and went and died, and they don't tell us because the families want to maintain their privacy, but really they're ashamed. They're ashamed to admit that their loved one died of COVID, and they don't want anyone to know what their loved one died of. They don't want people to know that they died of COVID. So because of that, because they want to maintain the privacy of these families and not tell anyone that these famous people died of COVID, people are like, COVID, no big deal. Don't be afraid of COVID. There are actually people carrying signs saying, don't be afraid of COVID, be afraid of the vaccine. And so, because of that, because people don't know that these famous people died of COVID, people that they know, people that they love died of COVID, because the families wanted their privacy, a lot more people died of COVID. But it is true that the vaccine, in the case of General Colin Powell, was imperfect, and it couldn't save his life because he had blood cancer in addition. And of course, something wrong with his immune system as a result. Was myeloma, and myeloma injures the immune system of the individual so that they can't fight off infections. And he just happened to be a public speaker, went on tours, spoke to a lot of people, a lot of contact with a lot of people, and he happened to catch COVID. So many African Americans were lost to COVID. It was rampant in their communities, and yet many African Americans chose not to get the vaccine because they thought that it was very prevalent in the social media online to warn African Americans not to get the vaccine. Like my friend that decided not to get the vaccine. Her whole family contracted COVID. And if she had COVID, she didn't tell. She kept that a secret. She kept it mum if she caught it from them. But she had a family reunion just the day before they all came down with COVID. So she and her son probably did catch it, but they didn't die of it because they're young people and they were just lucky. They're just lucky. But she wouldn't get the vaccine. And she still won't get the vaccine. She refuses to get the vaccine because some people believe that it's the mark of the beast and that the vaccine has stuff in it that's terrible for them and that's very dangerous. So, while I would say that people shouldn't be forced to get the vaccine because who knows, it might really even have all those lethal things in it. We don't know. We don't know what is in the vaccine. We don't know. We're just told what to believe. We're told what to believe, and we're told to get the vaccine. We don't know. We don't know what's in the vaccine. But the vaccine has been proven. It's been shown to save many lives. And these African American people see it as an intrusion into their bodies by the white man, and they don't want it. They don't want it. They don't want to be forced. They feel like they're being experimented on. So they didn't get the benefit of the vaccine. And then because they didn't get the benefit of the vaccine, many of them are dying. Many African Americans were on the front lines during COVID, working with the public. Nurses, fast food workers, janitors, all sorts of people that were African American were working directly with the public. And of course they were trumpeted as the nation's heroes. Right, they're the heroes, but the heroes are getting creamed by the COVID. That's why they're heroes, because they put their lives on the line. Just to maintain a job, just to keep a roof over their heads. And heard a speech by a bus driver the other day on the bus. Yeah, the bus driver made a speech. He was like, man, we need to raise the minimum wage. We need to raise the minimum wage to $15 an hour. Yeah, and he's talking in the same breath about how houses cost $350,000. But don't you know that if you increase double the minimum wage overnight, that the price of the houses will also double overnight, and all the goods and services that you depend on will double overnight. So it'll be just like there was no increase at all. Just like there was no increase at all. That's how the poor are kept down. Because of runaway inflation and because of errant spending. The poor are kept down, and doubling the minimum wage does nothing. Does nothing to help the plight of the poor, because then if you double the minimum wage, all the goods and services double in price too. the homeowners and the real estate agencies and the landlords and the grocery store owners will respond to having to pay double the wages by charging double the price. In other words, they will always charge as much as the market will bear. It's true. They'll charge as much as the market will bear. They can get you to work 60 hours a week now, just like a puppet on a string. Then they'll get you to work 60 hours a week forever. Always. They'll always keep you working 60 hours or more a week. Forever. No matter how much the minimum wage is raised. But raising the minimum wage will put us at a disadvantage with China and other countries. They'll kill us. They'll murder us because we increase the minimum wage that much. So the money becomes worth less, and there's more inflation. And if China can do it for $5, and we can do it for 15, you could see that there's a bigger gap with the higher minimum wage than if China could do it for $5 and we can do it for $7.50. So I digress. Colin Powell, wonderful man, wonderful life, and it is true we need to do something about poverty and the poor and help people get ahead. But there's very specific steps that are necessary to help the poor and to help people get ahead. And we're not taking those steps. We're not taking them. I think labor unions would probably be a good idea if we had labor unions for office workers, labor unions for fast food people. They could do a lot. They could do a lot too. Probably would the labor unions would recommend raising the minimum wage, just because they think that's a solution, and it's not a solution. But minimum wage hasn't been raised for many years. Maybe it is time for the minimum wage to keep pace with inflation, but it's a never-ending cycle. It never ceases. It never ends. Always going to keep the poor down. Always. So they can't even afford a place to live unless they work 60 hours a week or more. So that's it. Colin Powell, a life lost too soon. Too soon. Even though he was 84 years old, it was still too soon. He had some great things to say, and I hope you read his memoirs. A great man, just a great man, a great leader, and an asset to our country now lost. And I'll see you next time.